For a couple years, I've been hearing a lot of buzz about the Quad Cortex from Neural DSP, and it's made me curious, very curious. So I picked one up a few months ago, but being summertime in Myrtle Beach, my schedule's been pretty insane, so I haven't had a chance to check it out till now. I've seen a lot of video about the Quad Cortex and recently been to some other bands' gigs where the guitar players were using them, and there's no question, they sound great. I've been extremely satisfied with my Kempers and really haven't had any desire to look anywhere else, but, well, I'm a guitar nerd. If there's something new out there, I gotta check it out. I've read the manual, I've watched some videos to familiarize myself with how it works, and I've fiddled with it a little bit, so let's dive in. So the first rig I want to set up is a good crunchy rock tone. Now, I haven't taken the time yet to learn all of the amp models that are built into the Quad Cortex, so I'm going to go with something that I'm familiar with in the real world, and that would be a Brit Plexi 100 patch. Now, that's basically a model of a 100-watt Marshal super lead with the channels jumped. Now, I've got all of the controls set similar to how I would set them on my baby Plexi, which you can see in the video above. Now, I'm particularly fond of the sound of my Marshal Studio Vintage 20 through a 412 I have that's loaded with Celestion G12 EVH speakers. And as I looked through here, I noticed they have the 412 EV Straight G12 cabinet that is a CAV 412 loaded with the EVH speakers. Now in my studio, I use Sennheiser 421 and a Shure SM57. That's what's loaded up here, and the placement is right about where I would put it. So there you have it. Now let's give that a listen. All right, that sounds great, but here in my studio, I use a 4-mic setup. In addition to the 57 and 421, I also use a VR1 ribbon mic from SE Electronics, as well as a vintage 67 condenser mic from JZ Microphones. Now, the Quad Cortex lets you use 2 mics per speaker cabinet, so to mimic what I do in my studio, I'm going to have to get a little bit creative here. So what I'm going to do is add a split, set the split to come in after the amp. Then down here on the second line, I'm going to add another of the same cabinet for the sake of consistency. Then in here, I'm going to change the mics. Here I'm going to go with the condenser 184, and over here I'll go with the ribbon 160. Now there are no one-to-one models of the mics, of those 2 mics that I use, so it's not going to be exactly the same, but it'll be close. Now I'm getting plenty of high-end and high mids out of the 57 and the 421, so I've moved these speakers out close to the edge of the cone. All right, so now let's hear what we've got. All right, sounds good, but there's a long way to go. Okay. Now, I'm going to be adding some effects here. So I'm going to change this to come down to row 3, change this to multiple outputs, and I'm going to go ahead and bring the level down now because I know it's going to get kind of loud. So anyway, here's what we've got again. Here in my studio, I've got a few pedals that I like to use in front of my amps from time to time. For drive, I really like the sound of my BB preamp boost pedal from Exotic Effects. And if you go to overdrive here, just turns out they've got one. Now, I've got the knobs set pretty much how I would set them here in the real world. So let's hear what that sounds like. Now, I like that a lot, but it can definitely still use some tweaking. So I'll come down to this line, scroll up a little bit. I'm going to add an 8-band parametric EQ. And again, I've already gone through and set the defaults how I want this. So if I go into the EQ, you'll see all I've done here, I boosted the lows quite a bit here. I got 5 dB of a low shelf set at 192. And it's a pretty wide Q. And then here I've put in a high shelf at just over 2500 hertz. Again, fairly wide Q, and I added a decibel of that. So let me turn this off, and I'll turn it on. You can hear the difference. Fattens it up a little bit and gives it a little bit of sparkle on top. But we're not done. Next, go through. I'm going to add another EQ. This one is going to be a low-high cut. And I've got the high cut or the low cut set at 113 hertz with a 6 dB per octave roll off. And I've got the low pass or the high cut set at over 5500 hertz and with a 6 dB roll off. So again, I'm going to turn that off. Let me just do it here. And then I'll turn it back on. You'll hear it's a subtle difference, but it just cleans it up a little more. So that'll help it sit in the mix just a little bit better without a bunch of low-end noise or high-end noise competing with other things. And finally, I'm going to bring in yet another EQ here. I'm going to use the parametric 3-band EQ. Now, this is a little trick I learned from Jason Sedidi's YouTube page. I've added the parametric 3-band EQ here. Now, what I did, I set bands 1 and 3 both to 650 hertz. And this kind of acts as a tilt EQ where I can add both a little bit of lower stuff and a little bit of higher stuff just as kind of a finishing touch to the EQ. So I'm going to turn this off. Now, when I turn it on, it's very subtle. Now, as you can see, I've boosted the highs 1 decibel, and I've also boosted below 650 2 dB. And this will just help to fatten things up and make it a little more clear on top. So I'll turn it off. Now, when I kick it back on, it's extremely subtle, but I do think it makes a difference. But for a good basic rock tone, I think that works well. Now, over here, I'm going to add a delay, if I can find it. And I'll go with the dual delay. Here's how I've got this set. I've got it set to a quarter note and an eighth note. The mix is up at 60.3%, and pretty much double the feedback on the eighth note. So here's that. I know the delay sounds pretty high right now, but there's a reason for that. Because next, I'm going to add a split here. Bring it in right there. Actually, I'll move it over one more. Now down here, I'm going to add some reverb. I'm going to go with a hall verb. And now you've got this. Here, since I did that split, that brought up my signal a little bit. And that's why over here on the multi-out, I brought it down to minus 4.1. Now I've got one more piece to add here. I'm going to add another reverb and set it to the ambience verb. And if you look, the hall verb, I've got it set like that. You know, decays 2 seconds, mix is only 30%, blah, blah, blah. Now if I go over here to the ambience verb, I've got the mix on that at 54.1 with a little bit of pre-delay. Of course, high pass and low pass is set accordingly. Now I'm going to let you hear with that ambience. It just gives it a little bit of a three-dimensional room sound. Now, if I was just using that on its own, it wouldn't be set that hot. But when you hear it with the delay and the other reverb, then this is what you got. So for a good all-purpose, just rock and roll tone, I think that sounds great. Cleans up pretty decent when you back off on the knob. Now, I guess I could add another compressor like 1176 or something after the EQ blocks, and that would kind of help with the little volume disparity there. I'm not going to mess with that right now. But what I am going to do, occasionally, I like to add some chorus to my guitar sound. So add the chorus engine. That's set like this. I've got it set kind of just over halfway. A little bit of depth. All this. And that sounds like this. You can't do chorus in Marshall without playing a little bit of Zakk Wylde. And that's my basic crunch tone. Now, for a lead sound, I like to start with that. You turn off the chorus. First thing I'm going to do is copy this scene over to scene G. Whew. So I accidentally went to a different preset without saving that. So I wiped the whole thing out. So I had to go back and rebuild it real quick. So hopefully I've got everything exactly the way it was and in the same slots on there and everything. But anyhow, moving forward, I want to build a lead sound. Now, generally I start with my crunch sound. I've copied this over to scene G. First thing I'll do, go to my drive pedal. I'm going to bring the volume up to 8. That's going to hit the amp a little bit harder and give me some more overdrive. Now, I could probably stop there and have a great lead sound, but I like to mess with the EQ a little bit. So I'll go here to the parametric. First thing I'm going to do is enable all of this so that it works in scene mode. I wish this was enabled by default, but it's not, so you got to do it. Anyhow, so I'm going to turn on a couple more bands here. This is 800 hertz. Actually, let me do this. And I've got 800 hertz boosted at 1.8 decibels. If I go up here, this will be just over 1500 hertz, and I've got that boosted a half a dB. So let me close that out. Play that for you. I gotta say, I was planning on being impressed, but for just using the models that came on this thing, I'm really liking how this is going so far. I think that's a sound that I would get a ton of mileage out of. And here's the kicker. This unit has so much power under the hood that there's a lot more I can do. In my next video, I'm gonna add another amp, another speaker cabinet, some effects, and transform this little preset into a one-size-fits-all rig. So make sure you keep checking back for that. And as always, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.